Thank you, Professor Bell. I'll just mention there is a pair of glasses that were left in the past room, and if you're missing them, they're with the tech station, okay, where the technicians work out of. Expanding a little bit on this idea of ecophobia and children, if you do a Google search on COP15, which is the Copenhagen Climate Conference, and opening ceremony, you'll see the film that they showed all delegates, and in fact showed the whole world, which used children as a scare tactic, and it was pretty horrific. On a positive note, I've started to see a certain amount of pushback against their adult teachers and against their own parents concerning the climate issue. For example, at the Ottawa International Children's Festival, which was held in Ottawa, Canada, earlier in June, they had something called the Climate Change Forest. Okay, now the advisor to the students was an IPCC scientist, and I went there expecting to see all kinds of catastrophe forecasts for the climate, and I wandered through the children's forest for the climate change exhibit, and there was nothing on climate. I mean, it was really wonderful. The children had let all that stuff go right over their head. They focused on energy conservation, they focused on pollution reduction, but there was nothing about sea level rise or increasing storms or rising temperatures. It was brilliant. And so I think we're starting to see a pushback. I think it's a natural thing that children like to oppose authority. And right now, the authorities are saying things that some of the children are saying, it doesn't make too much sense. I see that also when I speak in schools. And that's something that Steve Goreham, our next speaker, does. He's actually spoken in colleges as the executive director of the Climate Science Coalition of America. That's a U.S. affiliate of the ICCC. So Steve, of course, is doing some of this grassroots awareness with teachers in schools as well. CSCA is a non-political association of scientists, engineers, and concerned citizens focused on educating Americans about the realities of climate change. He is also author of the book Climatism: Science, Common Sense, and the 21st Century's Hottest Topic. And you'll see he'll also be signing his book outside in the foyer from 11:15 to 11:45. The website, if you want to check out his book online, is climatism.org. A former electrical engineer and business executive for Fortune 100 and startup companies, Steve lectures and writes articles on climate change and renewable energy and is working to bring awareness to Americans on a grassroots level. So I won't say any more and introduce Steve Goreham.
Thank you, Tom. Well, good morning. Great to join you this morning. As Lord Christopher Monckton says, I'm just a lay person, and so it's quite an honor for me to join this group today along with Professor Bell and Dr. Schmidt and all the other great scientists. I'm also a relative newcomer to the climate battle, and my hat is off to all the great scientists and the members of this room who have been fighting the battle for many years. Where'd the slide advancer go? Thank you. What I'd like, it's been 20 months since ClimateGate, the hacked release of emails from East Anglia University and the climate research unit there. And what I'd like you to consider this morning is when the ship of man-made global warming ran into ClimateGate, did it hit an iceberg or did it hit an ice cube? It is true that the momentum of man-made global warming has slowed over the last 20 months. We've had the Copenhagen 2009 conference. We've had the Cancun 2010 conference. Many advocates and attendees there wanted to see mandatory greenhouse gas restrictions on the nations of the earth. That did not happen. In 2009, cap and trade failed in the United States Congress. And the fall elections of 2010 brought a new crop of members of Congress, many very skeptical of the theory of man-made global warming. And it appears at the end of 2012, the futile Kyoto Protocol Treaty will end without a successor. Now, yesterday we heard some euphoria, and we also heard some statements about how they know they've lost. But I think an objective observer would have to say that the ship of man-made global warming hit an ice cube and not an iceberg. Ladies and gentlemen, scientists and honored guests, the world is in the grip of a madness. The world remains in a grip of a madness. This madness is climatism, the belief that man-made greenhouse gases are destroying Earth's climate. Today, 193 of 194 heads of state of the nations of the earth are trying to put futile policies into place to stop the planet from warming up. Chancellor Angela Merkel has said, "Climate change is accelerating. It threatens our well-being, our security, and our economic development." President Obama has said, "The science is beyond dispute and the facts are clear." Prime Minister David Cameron says, "We have a moral imperative to act and to act now." And from Dr. Carter, we heard this morning about how Prime Minister Gillard is pushing a carbon tax in Australia. Now, I may have missed the memo, but I don't remember that any of these 193 have changed their position in the last 20 months. And as a matter of fact, President Václav Klaus of the Czech Republic remains the only head of state who has challenged the theory of man-made global warming. All of our major scientific organizations are firmly in the man-made global warming camp. Yes, the Royal Society in the UK has softened their position, but they all still think that man is responsible for the recent 20th century warming. Maybe it's because we have an ideology at play here, and this is not just a question of science. And in the United States, professors and chancellors of 676 universities have signed the President's Climate Commitment, stating, "We recognize the scientific consensus that global warming is real and is largely being caused by humans. We further recognize the need to reduce the global emission of greenhouse gases by 80% by mid-century at the latest." Recently, I participated in a week-long online voice thread with college students of Elmhurst College in Illinois. And after that was done, I want to read a few of the amazing statements they made. One student said, "I always thought that global warming was happening because of what humans are doing to the earth and never even thought it could be for other reasons. I was actually shocked to hear that there is possibly nothing we can do and it is just a natural process occurring." Another said, "Your position is very new to me and I find it to be quite interesting. It's very similar to finding out that there is no Santa Claus." This is a college student, folks. And another said, "We have all basically been totally misinformed and it is horrible to think that such a large amount of people are so duped. How is it that something that is so definite as to be in textbooks and backed by so much research has been able to be propelled into a desperate cry for help around the world? Ladies and gentlemen, we have an entire generation of young people that are being taught the false ideology of climatism." And of course, as many have said in this conference, climatism is being propelled forward by money. The Pew Environment Group estimated that in 2010, the world spent $243 billion to try and convert from our traditional hydrocarbon fuels to renewable energy. And that went up 30% from 2009. U.S. federal and state governments are spending $20 billion a year to subsidize renewable energy. And the U.S. federal government spends an additional $15 billion on climate change research. But as we heard earlier, very little of that research is to determine how the climate works. It's to determine what are the impacts of man-made climate change. Oh, and the Fortune 500 companies, just about all of them have signed up to man-made global warming. Even the American Petroleum Institute has an official position that warming is due to man. And then we have C40, the Large Cities Climate Leadership Group. Those are mayors working around the world to try and stop emissions and save the planet. Chairman Michael Bloomberg says, as an elected official, your job is not to ask the public where they want to go and get behind them. Your job is to tell the public and convince the public where they should go and lead from the front. And this reminds me of a quote by Václav Klaus, where he says, "Being often with many leading politicians, I feel frustrated they do not listen. They already know. They fully subscribe to the idea that talking about saving the planet is an effective way to show they're caring for humanity. So the political leaders, the intellectual elites, they've already made up their mind. So what is the path out of climate madness? Well, I think this conference continues to be a great vehicle to get attention from the press and reinforce the views of the skeptical scientific community. So kudos to the Heartland for putting it on again. I submit to you there are two paths. One is to continue to drive climate science. The second is to educate the common citizen. Since this is a scientific panel, I'll do a little climate science. In my mind, there are four false scientific conclusions that climatism has come to and made into dogmas. The first is that the modern warming of the late 20th century is abnormal. But anyone who studies history, the Holocene climate optimum, the medieval warm period, knows that this is not the case. Second, that carbon dioxide, a trace gas in our atmosphere, drives Earth's climate. If anyone has read James Hansen's recent book, Storms of My Grandchildren, you'll find that Dr. Hansen thinks that everything is caused by carbon dioxide. The ice ages, the rise and fall of the oceans, even the extinction of animals throughout human history. Really a remarkable conclusion, seen through, as I put it, carbon-tinted glasses. Third, that positive feedback of water vapor boosts Earth's temperature. But thanks to new research by Dick Lindzen and Roy Spencer and others, it appears that these feedbacks are actually negative and that climate sensitivity is low. And finally, the one I want to spend a little time on, the recent rise in atmospheric carbon dioxide is due to man. Many skeptical scientists have accepted this conclusion. I do not agree. The IPCC says that the atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide in 2005 exceeds by far the natural range over the last 650,000 years as determined from ice cores. And they show this graph, a hockey stick graph, by the way, showing the recent rise in carbon dioxide and then thousands of years of unchanging carbon dioxide. The problem with this graph is not the recent spike. It's the ice core data and the assumption that we've had thousands of years of unchanging CO2. By the way, everyone here should understand that the hockey stick is the recipe for climatism. We've had the discredited Michael Mann hockey stick, which showed 20th century temperature rise and thousands of years of flat temperature. We have this carbon dioxide hockey stick, and I understand we now have a new hockey stick out on sea level rise. Michael Mann's a co-author of that, and that basically says, well, we had very little change in sea level rise for thousands of years, and now we've had an acceleration. It turns out that another way to measure atmospheric carbon dioxide is with leaf stomata. Leaf stomata are holes on the underside of plants or in pine needles that allow carbon dioxide to enter the plant and take part in photosynthesis. It turns out that the amount of atmospheric CO2 affects how many leaf stomata that grow on the plant. When atmospheric carbon dioxide levels are low, plants grow with a high density of stomata, providing more holes, allowing more carbon dioxide to get into the plant. And then when atmospheric carbon dioxide levels are high, leaves grow with a lower stomata density. The plant still gets the carbon dioxide it needs, but it cuts down on the amount of water vapor that escapes from the plant or the leaf. So by correlating modern carbon dioxide levels with leaf stomata levels, scientists can then go back into past history, uncover leaves that were buried in the past, and get an estimate of past carbon dioxide levels. And the leaf stomata proxy contradicts the ice core data. I call your attention to a master's thesis done by Loie Cohenberg of the University of Utrecht in 2005, where she plotted atmospheric carbon dioxide for the last couple thousand years, and she found levels of 350 and 400 parts per million 1,500 years ago. She also found a rate of change of carbon dioxide of 50 to 100 parts per million per year. Both of these, by the way, there are other studies that find similar things. Both of these conclusions conflict with the ice core data that the IPCC has relied on. In addition, the IPCC's carbon model says that these rate of changes cannot occur without man-made emissions. Dr. Cohenberg attributed this to outgassing from the oceans, and the significance of this, of course, is apparent. The IPCC's idea that man-made emissions of carbon dioxide are the cause of climate disruption and the recent warming is not really correct. So I urge all the scientists here to take a look at this hockey stick. To get back to our path out of the madness, one is drive the climate science. Second is to educate the common citizen. And a recent by the way, common citizens seem to have more common sense than our intellectual elites and our political leaders about the climate. A Gallup survey done in 2007 and then in 2010, asking the question, how serious of a threat is global warming to you and your family, shows a marked decrease in people's concern in Europe and in the United States, so we're making good progress. By educating the common citizen, we can win the battle for realistic climate science, and eventually the intellectual elites will have to listen. And by the way, I ask everyone here to use terms that the public can understand. One of those is climatism, the belief that man-made greenhouse gases are destroying Earth's climate. It's important that people know that this is an ideology. This is more than just a question of science. It's an effort to change societies all across the globe. And the second one I like comes from Leighton Stewart. CO2 is green. We all ought to be using that also. That's a slap in the face of the green movement, a slap in the face of climatism, and it points out that carbon dioxide is great for the biosphere, as many have said already at this conference. So in summary, ClimateGate might have been the end of the beginning, but we have a long, long way to go to win this battle, and we need to continue to drive the science. I urge everyone here to take a look with a critical eye at that carbon dioxide hockey stick. And third, let's go out and reach the common man. I'd be super happy if everybody here left and used that term climatism. Let's put a label on this climate madness.